first, let me give you a little bit of context. I've got a few pictures here to kind of help get things in our heads, and it's really helpful because so much of what God is going to have Obadiah tell Edom, it's rooted in where they were, like physically, geographically, where they were. And you may recognize some of the things that I'm going to share with you. So Edom let me go back to something before the geography. Edom is made up of the descendants of Esau. So an important part of this message is how Edom should have reacted when their brother Jacob, Esau and Jacob, when their brother Jacob, in this case Judah, is attacked. When Jerusalem is sacked in 586, Edom did not defend them, did not stand up for them. They did worse, as we'll see in what Obadiah has to say. So these are people that are like family, but they aren't acting like family. They did not act like family. They gloated, they rejoiced in somebody else's downfall. And one of the things that we'll see is there are things that they tick God off, rightfully so, righteously so. And among those are people who do not stand up for and stand with their neighbors. That really gets to him. I think God meant it when he said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. And a big part of what Edom is being judged for is not loving their neighbor as themselves at all. At all. So one of the things that I want to do, and then we'll get into the geography, one of the things that I want to do is I want us to look at this, and the words that he has for Edom are negative. This is a judgment book, the kind of thing that we don't like, but that we are not balanced, healthy, God-fearing Christians if we skip over, ignore, and reject. Okay? God is not just a God of grace, he is also a God of justice. He is a God of righteousness and a God of holiness. You worship an incomplete God, half a God, an idol God, when you purposely choose the half of God that you like more than the other. You see? You create for yourself a different God. So we want to get the whole message, the whole counsel of God. As we look at the negatives, what I'd like for us to do is to think about it kind of like for those of us who are old enough, or younger people who are into analog technology, because that happens too. But those of us who are old enough to remember film cameras, yes, there used to be like cameras which actually used film. That wasn't just a verb we use, I'm going to film something. It's actually actual film. And when you would take that film out and give it to the developer, they would create negatives. I know some of you are sitting there going, yeah, I know, I paid a lot of money for a lot of those things. But for those who don't know, you would get these negatives. And when you look at those, you get, just like if you're in Photoshop or something like that, and you apply the filter that is the negative filter, you get all the opposites. Light is dark, dark is light, up is down, left is right, all of that kind of stuff. And then they have to develop that image into the proper opposite of the negative. And then you get a real picture. It's fascinating. It's incredible the way that was developed. But it is a weird process. You have to go through the negative first. You can see where there's easy illustrations there, right? What I want us to do is to think of Obadiah as a negative that shows us the heart of God. That when we see him judging the kingdom of Edom for what they had done that was wrong, that was negative, that was upside down, backwards, and opposite of God's will, that he is also revealing what is the positive picture. He's revealing to us what could have been. It's in all of the you didn't do's. It's in the you did this, the opposite of what I wanted. And so what I want to challenge you to do today is not to just hear Obadiah's words as, oh my goodness, what a harsh judgment. I want you to hear what God really wanted all their neighbors to hear after the dust of their judgment settled, which is they could have avoided all this if only they had done this. Look for what the opposite image is. Look for the godly, positive image, the light instead of the dark as we go through this. And so that's what I'm going to challenge myself and you guys with me to do. So here's the geography. They were a city in the mountains, a town in the mountains, a kingdom in the mountains. And when I say in the mountains, I mean like literally in the mountains, not on, in the mountains. They had caves, they had structures built into the sides of the mountains and in the canyons. And the way into the kingdom of Edom and their capital, or Edom, and their capital city was through this very narrow passage. You came up this valley. They had plenty of warning if an invading force was coming because they had a view like you wouldn't believe. Okay, it's like going to Cloudcroft and looking out as you're coming down the mountain into Alamogordo. Okay, picture that for a second. And then those valleys and those rocky crevasses and all of that kind of stuff. You go through there. An enemy would have to come through there. So you had warning. You had a vantage point where you looked down and could see them coming, and you had easy pickings on the invaders. So they thought of themselves, man, we've got the perfect spot. And we'll talk about that here in a second. But that's where they were. Another way that you can see that, let me go back. If you look at this, doesn't that remind you a lot of the news coverage when they were looking for Osama bin Laden and people like him in Afghanistan? And how difficult it was to find out which cave system, not just a cave, but cave system they might be in. That was very much like the kingdom of Edom. Okay, they've been doing this for a long time in that part of the world. And it was very much like that. If anybody who's here or watching this served over there, you kind of have a very real picture of what that is like. This is one of the parts of the trail. You can go, it's a 9-mile trail to go up through this valley and up into there. So you can kind of see how that would be and what great advantage they would have. If you're those people right here, if you're these people, I don't know if y'all can see them, it's little tiny, but there are people there, and you're walking up through there, this is the bad part of any Western, is it not? You see the wagons and the people headed west, they're going up through here, and what's about to happen? Up there on the edge, you're about to start seeing horses and feathers, right? Right up there. Tanya's, where did she go? Is it your grandfather or great-grandfather? Great-grandfather, definitely. But I think even her, great-grandfather, down here in Mills County, still saw that while he was still alive on the hills that, well, now they're sold, but where I used to hunt, the same place where the Native Americans used to hunt. You can see how this would be very easy to defend. You would just shoot your spears, in this case, and arrows later, right down in there, and you would feel like, how are they ever going to come get us? I mean, the worst that could happen, we need to chunk rocks, right? But you still had the best way to chunk rocks. It goes on like that for miles. And then you finally come into this opening where you will start to see this city. And there were freestanding structures, but like that one in the center, most of those have since been destroyed by earthquakes a long centuries ago. But you would go in and their city was up in the tops of these mountains, among that, and then caves in. I don't know, again, how well you can see, but those black dots up there are the caves in which they hid their wealth, in which they lived, worked, all of that kind of stuff. It was a trade kingdom, and so they actually had quite a good amount of money hidden up in those caves, a lot of gold in those caves. They dealt with wood, which is kind of funny because you look at all the pictures and you go, where were they getting that? But they sold lumber, they sold olives and everything related to olives and olive trees, all of that kind of stuff. And being among the trade routes of the time, they were a wealthy kingdom. You probably recognize this, right? Raiders of the Lost Ark, what is this, the last one, the Last Crusade? This is in there. Petra is the city. Now, they did not particularly carve this part. This is the one that's in the movie as they go back in there, right? They didn't carve this one on the outside. This is what was carved by the people who conquered them, which we're going to read about in Obadiah. But in the kingdom that came behind them, you get a lot of the carvings that we would recognize and that you can still go see if that's on your bucket list and if things, calm down enough that you can get in there. This is probably closer to what it looked like at the time of Obadiah. Not quite as ornate, but you could see. And these were later used even into the Roman Empire. It was abandoned after sometime 300 and something. It lost for a while. People forgot it was up there. I don't know how that happens, but it happens. And these would have been, you would have the treasury and different parts of the government and different parts of business and things like that. But just this incredible cave system that made them feel like they were invincible. Nobody can get to us. We can run and hide even if they tried. We cannot be beaten. Okay, so that very much became their attitude. This is part of the walk just to get in. This is just before you get to the entrance where it opens up that I showed you earlier. Just imagine how vulnerable you are if you think you're going to pull something over on the Edomites and this is your way into their front door. They have you, don't they? They can drop a rock on your head so fast it's not funny. Or, like my friend David Lumpkin, when I was a kid, they can drop a dart from the roof of the house and hit you right in the neck, like I told you all about not too long ago. They can get you, okay? And it just made them feel like, they were the best. And that was part of their problem. We'll get to this part. I'm going to back up just so you don't have that too far into your head. Let's read the book first. This is from the NIV. It's the old NIV, so it'll be a little different from your app. This is what the sovereign Lord says about Edom. We have heard a message from the Lord. An envoy was sent to the nations to say, "Rise, and let us go against her for battle. See, I will make you small among the nations. You will be utterly despised. The pride of your heart has deceived you, and you who live in the clefts of the rocks and make your home on the heights, and you who say to yourself, 'Who can bring me down to the ground?' Though you soar like the eagle, and make your nest among the stars. From there I will bring you down, declares the Lord. If thieves came to you, if robbers in the night, oh, what a disaster awaits you. Would they not steal only as much as they wanted? If grape pickers came to you, would they not leave a few grapes? But how Esau will be ransacked, his hidden treasures pillaged. All your allies will force you to the border. Your friends will deceive and overpower you. Those who eat your bread will set a trap for you, but you will not detect it. In that day, declares the Lord, will I not destroy the wise men of Edom, men of understanding in the mountains of Esau? Your warriors, O Taman, will be terrified, and everyone in Esau's mountains will be cut down in the slaughter. Because of the violence against your brother Jacob, you will be covered with shame. You will be destroyed forever. On the day you stood aloof, while strangers carried off his wealth and foreigners entered his gates and cast lots for Jerusalem, you were like one of them. You should not look down on your brother in the day of his misfortune, nor rejoice over the people of Judah in the day of their destruction, nor boast so much in the day of their trouble. You should not march through the gates of my people in the day of their disaster, nor look down on them in their calamity in the day of their disaster, nor seize their wealth in the day of their disaster. You should not wait at the crossroads to cut down their fugitives, nor hand over their survivors in the day of their trouble. The day of the Lord is near for all nations. As you have done, it will be done to you. Your deeds will return upon your own head. Just as you drank on my holy hill, so all the nations will drink continually. They will drink and be as if they had never been. But on Mount Zion will be deliverance. It will be holy, and the house of Jacob will possess its inheritance. The house of Jacob will be a fire, and the house of Joseph a flame, and the house of Esau will be stubble. And they will set it on fire and consume it. There will be no survivors from the house of Esau. The Lord has spoken. People from the Negev will occupy the mountains of Esau, and the people from the foothills will possess the land of the Philistines. They will occupy the fields of Ephraim and Samaria, and Benjamin will possess Gilead. This company of Israelites, exiles, who are in Canaan, will possess the land as far as Zarephath. The exiles from Jerusalem who are in the Sepharad will possess the towns of the Negev. Deliverers will go up on Mount Zion to govern the mountains of Esau, and the kingdom will be the Lord's. All right. So you see what we're saying. It's a hard message, isn't it? But you can see, as I was also saying, about the negatives, the things that God values? What was God looking for before it got so bad that he had to say, the cup of my wrath for you is full. You are done. It is over, and there is no turning back. What could they have done? And it's not complicated, is it? It's really not hard to see what God wanted. It's only hard to see when you want something else more than you want to please the Lord. When we give into our idols, when we give into our pride, when we give into our arrogance, when we trust in ourselves, in our things, and in our positions and our possessions instead of the Lord. It's a short message, but that's all in there. Okay, so I gave you a preview a second ago. They had their pride built on basically three things that he calls out right at the very beginning. And at the very beginning, he says, you who live on the heights. They thought they were impenetrable, invincible. They couldn't be taken. They thought they'd found the safest, best spot a kingdom could ever have. They even had water, if you say, well, but you're up in the mountains, they could cut you off. They had food supplies, they had water, and they had a secret back entrance, which now you can go on a tour of, but at the time that their enemies didn't know about, and they could come in this secret back entrance and still be able to get supplies. They just thought there's no way. We're safe. We are untouchable. And you know how it is. When we get arrogant and we think we're untouchable. That was the idea of the Tower of Babel, was it not? Even before Babel, people thought that Noah was nuts because what can your little tiki god do? And then they learned the hard way. Tower of Babel, they thought, well, this time we'll outbuild him. He won't be able to touch us when we get up this tower. And we'll find our way to the heavens ourselves. We don't need this God. And they were not untouchable. And now we all have to do Duolingo because their mistake. Isn't that ridiculous? When we get our pride from our place, whether that is, in their case, security, military might, an untouchable attitude, God doesn't just oppose the proud and give grace to the humble. God actively opposes the proud. He doesn't just say, I'm not going to support you in your pride. God will bring us down a notch or two, or in their case, if it's bad enough, completely. And so he first touches on their pride, built in, nobody can touch me. Not a good place to be. You don't find your security in your power. You don't find your security in your control. Now, we can bring that home, can't we? The power that you think you have in your home, the control you think you have over others, is a farce, isn't it? Doesn't God prove that to us over and over and over again, that our ability to control everything in our life is absolutely an illusion? And often circumstances come into our life, and it seems like they're there for no other reason but to show us you really can't control everything you think you can control. And that's by God's design quite often. Now, sometimes I think we set ourselves up for a fall. He doesn't have to do all that much. We built a life that looks like a game of Jenga, and we pull the wrong little block of wood out, and it all comes crashing down. Sometimes God has to actively oppose our pride. It is so high and so wrong. He says, I will bring you down, though you soar like the eagle and make your nest among the stars, verse 4. From there, I will bring you down. I gave you a hint already. If you develop that negative, what's the positive on that side? Humility? It's kind of an easy one, isn't it? No. If you said humility is easy, you're lying, right? Because we're too much fallen flesh within us. But it's simple to figure out. What do we need to do? There's another song. Humble yourself in the sight of the Lord, and He will lift you up. I guess we need another verse. Become arrogant in the sight of the Lord, and He will bring you down. Nobody ever writes that verse, right? But except for Obadiah, that would be Obadiah's third verse. And then the Church of Christ would skip it, because we don't do the third verses all the time. But Humility. Trusting God as our security. Stopping the desire to control every little thing and just truly and truthfully letting God have it. Not saying, God, please straighten this out, and then going out and acting as if we are the ones, but truly letting God have His will in our life. Not just submitting our will in a prayer and calling that following God's will. Finding our security in Him. Being humble. Their second thing, he says, you're going to get looted. And he says, if there were people robbing your vineyard, they would at least leave you a few grapes, right? I'm not leaving you jack diddly squat. That's what he says. You will not have anything when these guys are done. They will roll over you and plunder you, and it will be over. Now, there's a reason for that. Later, he gets into why. What did they do when Judah was being attacked? What did they do when their brother, Jacob, is being plundered? They literally hold open the door and they let the armies come in. And they did. Historically, that's exactly what they did. They let some of the invasion force come right through the territory unopposed. They actually go around and make treaties with the pagan countries that if they were going to come and attack Israel, that they would stand back, thinking that that would keep them safe. And what happens? That's why God says, those people who ate your bread at the table while you were writing these treaties, those people who ate your bread, they will be the very nations I use to roll over you like a steamroller. Somebody mail Obadiah to the State Department. They'd probably use this. But it's not just them. We make deals with the devil sometimes. I will make sure that I have everything I need, or I will make sure things go my way, or I will do this. Trying to work things through our fiddling. It's still that control issue, isn't it? Work things through our fiddling instead of, again, letting God have His way and doing what's right. They got both things wrong. Then they didn't defend their neighbor. So, looking at that negative and developing that, what does it develop into? Love thy neighbor as thyself. When your neighbor is being attacked, you don't ignore it because, well, they kind of deserve that. When your neighbor is being attacked, you don't laugh about it and say, well, they had it coming. Gloating is not a fruit of the Spirit. Schadenfreude, the German word for taking pleasure in someone else's pain, is not from the Lord. Love your neighbor as yourself. Now, Edom could come back. They were never given a chance to respond. There was no talk back. Edom could have come back and said, well, but God, Jacob stole our inheritance. To which God could easily have said, now remind me again how that happened. Because as I recall, Esau sold out. They could have responded in jealousy and tried to justify their anger and said, but Jacob was a cheat. He was. It doesn't make it okay for you to rejoice in his calamity. You think in our world and in our time, there's a need for us to see that grace is not reserved just to the Christian and not just reserved. And then what I mean by that is we can't just like our own, but that we are to show grace, we are to show kindness, we are to show love, we are to pray for even the worst of our persecutors and enemies. There's no comeback. There's only, yes, Lord, help me to love like you love. When you develop this is what he's seeking. What he got was people that very gladly let foreign armies just absolutely trounce Jerusalem and drag them off into slavery. So you see why he was upset. He said, love your neighbor. And instead they held the door for heartache and slaughter. They didn't just hold the door. Some of the gold they had hidden in their caves came from Jerusalem. They looted after the foreign armies were gone. They looted their own, think about this, their own family's house. It's like what happened in New Orleans after Katrina. That's what they did to Jerusalem. Went in and said, well, everybody's gone, let me go get a big TV. It's not from the Lord to be selfish as other people fall. It's not from the Lord to take joy in other people's hardship. And so he reminds us, what I expected was for you to have loved your brother. Their other big thing, it's been up there a while, you know what it was, right? They had their wise men. They were a very well-educated country for the time, and they took a lot of pride in that. Look at that list for a second. One thing you'll notice when you go through the minor prophets is that it's uncomfortable, because it doesn't matter what country you live in or what time you live in, you can read them and go, good night, that might be us. Look at that. He even used our national symbol, didn't he? You who live among the eagles, from there I'll bring you down. If our trust as a society, if our trust as Christians is in our national pride, if it is in our military might, if it is in our wealth, if it is in our education, where is it not? And we can sprinkle God bless America all over things, but that's not the same thing as actually trusting God, is it? You trust the Lord. And the way you prove you trust the Lord is by looking at these developed pictures of what He wants you to be. People who trust Him, who humbly do His will. People who love the Lord their God with all their heart, mind, soul, and strength. People who love their neighbor as themselves. People who stand up for those people even who have wronged them in the past. People who will defend those even who have wronged them in the past. People who, instead of holding the door for the enemy, pick up, nurse, and bring into the door of their house those people that they might have even had a beef with. But it's their neighbor, and like Jesus, they're going to love them. It's the Good Samaritan picture. These would be like the Samaritans, except that they weren't good. They were not good in the least in this moment, and hadn't been for a very, very long time. Their biggest failure, I mentioned earlier, but I want to hit one more time. It is that one, the failure to love your neighbor. On the day you stood aloof while strangers carried off his wealth and foreigners entered his gates and cast lots for Jerusalem. Look at this last phrase. You were like them. When we're prideful, when we're jealous, when we're greedy, when we're cold-hearted to the people around us, we're just like them. We look at the world and all the problems that are going on in the world, and there are many. When we cease to be Jesus to others and instead start acting just like those around us or take advantage of the situation to gain something for ourselves, He would say to us, you are just like one of them. When we love, when we humble ourselves, when we serve our neighbor, even the neighbor that has wronged us. Then Philippians says, we shine, Philippians chapter 2, we shine like stars in the universe. We stand out like nobody else except for Jesus. And we're not like them. And that's what He wants us to be. So the book of Obadiah doesn't just give us a negative picture. It also gives us a picture of what we can be by just, pulling a George Costanza and looking at Edom and saying, I'll just do the opposite. You can be something better. You can be something holy. You can be something right. In Matthew 25, when He talks about the parable of the talents, you get this line. The king will reply, truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. Now think about this. Edom could have had that said to them. They could have given themselves in defense of Judah. And the message would have been this. Obadiah could have walked in there with a positive message. God has this to say to you. He saw your good deeds. He saw how you took care of them. He saw you take them in. He saw you nurse their wounds. He saw you feed them. He saw you clothe them. And the Edomites could have said, God, I don't know when we did that. And he would have said, when you dressed, clothed, fed, took care of, loved, nursed the wounds of Judah, you did that to me. And he would have loved them for it. Would have loved them for it. And Jesus says, that's still our choice. That's still what God wants. And that's still how we can live if we so choose. It doesn't have to be an Obadiah kind of message for the Church of Jesus Christ. It can be, welcome into your Father's happiness, good and faithful servants.